So welcome back to Live and Learn. And we've got Stephen Flurrie joining us again. Thank you, Stephen, for coming back.
Good to be here.
It sounds like you mean it there, almost. I think this episode we want to talk about generational leadership and why it matters. I think it's quite a hot topic at the moment. It's a big topic to look at in lots of angles. And I think we had a previous episode where we talked about building an award-winning leadership program.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess there's lots of now things to consider. And I think generational is something we touched on last time, wasn't it? That it's becoming more and more of a factor in the workplace on expectations different generations have maybe, and how best to engage them. That's something you're quite interested in, isn't it? I think, and we chatted about.
Yeah, I'm really interested in it. And, you know, in my role, lucky enough to work in leadership and leadership development and people development across the board, really. So I feel quite privileged to be part of what is a change in the way that people want to be led and what their expectations are of managers. And actually, it's quite exciting because it's quite transformational, I think.
Big shift, isn't it?
It's really nice to be involved in it, and especially in this capacity.
And obviously, it's a very big open-ended question, but in the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years, how do you think leadership's changed or what's expected? I think we talked off air and previously about certain old school leadership now just isn't recognisable, and there's a lot more focus on D&I and mental health and so on. What would you say in a nutshell how leadership's kind of changed?
Well, yes, I think what I think I see now is a different expectation of people when they come into the workplace. And, you know, for those that have seen the videos, our video arts videos, they're with good manager and bad manager. We really are now starting to see people come in. They don't even recognize bad manager as a thing in work. And so what that has is where they do encounter that, where it has a massive impact on retention. So people don't only expect it, they sort of demand it now. A new way of leading, inclusive, collaborative, open, honest, and, you know, manager as coach.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been interesting to see it. And I think lots of businesses have been doing this for many years, but there are still a lot of businesses, as I've said before, that have seen it as a nice to have, not an essential. And I think more and more now it's being seen as essential skill of a leader to, you know, have these more inclusive behaviors. And yeah, it's gonna become more important for all businesses, I think.
Yeah, and it's good for business, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah.
I think that's the message to everybody, isn't it? If you want to keep your best people, you know, we need to evolve.
Yeah, and key business metrics actually, and what the data is showing, that where leadership styles are more inclusive, then you are actually seeing increases in productivity, motivation, engagement, retention, all the key metrics. So it's so now that we're starting to see the real business reasons for doing it, along with the people reasons, they combine to become, you know, very important indeed.
And I guess when you're looking at generations in the workplace, is it something as L&D team, an award-winning L&D team, I'd add in the past, you factor that in when you're building a program? How much does that come in your thinking in terms of their learning styles, what they expect? Well, you need to standardise a program, of course, as well. Mm-hmm. So how does that play out in your thinking?
Oh, it's just such an interesting time as a learning professional, trying to get this balance between micro learning and macro learning, and you know, face to face and virtual and online, because actually you've still got really different needs out there across all of the generations, I think. And so yeah, it's really tricky time at the moment to understand. I think post COVID, I'm almost feeling it in the roles I'm doing, like this post COVID surge to get back in the classroom.
Yeah.
To get more face-to-face time and collaboration in a sort of, you know, more of a people or human way. And I don't know if that will wane over time, but so you've got that to factor in, but you've also got this new desire to do on-the-go learning, mobile, you know, bite-sized pieces of learning, which we've seen building up over, you know, quite a few years, really. For L&D professionals now, finding that balance and, you know, curating really good content, whether it's face-to-face or online, and getting it to the right people at the right time is, you know, a big challenge for us.
I think that's the key thing, getting the right content at the right time, isn't it, to the right people?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's, without stereotyping, but is there some things you've found with generations that have worked well than others. Obviously, you've got Gen Z in the workplace now. Maybe they're used to working from home. We've got baby boomers who all their training was probably face to face. Have you found that any sort of kind of clashing between the generations, especially with like policy? I know we had lots of clients at the time when we had like COVID and things, but people who didn't come back or people that couldn't work from home, and you had this kind of almost internal battle as well between generations in terms of, oh, I never had that, and people now expect these things, and I guess as a learning team it's quite hard to make it fair or just to have a set policy maybe.
Yeah, it's yeah, there certainly are some challenges there, and even just on, we have a full hybrid policy, 2 days in and 3 days out of the office. So I still feel like there's work to be done in terms of the culture around that, even, and making sure people feel included when they're not present in the office. And so I think there's still work to be done around that, although it's a great approach, and I think for the most part it's fantastic. But from a learning point of view, I think that what we're finding is people want a more personalized approach to learning anyway. So maybe Gen Z or are more used to or expected to be able to work in a hybrid fashion, but they also they expect more to be able to drive their own learning, to find learning when they need it and as they need it. And I think that's probably a bigger difference, moving away from more structured learning pathways. But again, it's you can Google anything, can't you? If you Google how to give feedback, you might get a million results. So within an organization, having some structure around, this is how we like to do it, and here are some great ways to learn about it, so people can get
some control
quality,
over it.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? Finding ways to deliver learning at the right point. And
I guess to have that standard kind of approach between all the kind of often conflicting generations, what do you think kind of good modern leadership is to you? So I think we touched on it: empathy, inclusive leadership, your team's mental health, lead by example. Maybe there's some things I kind of think of, but is anything, would you agree with those? Anything you would add to that?
Absolutely agree with them. A big thing for me, I think probably that I would definitely add near the top of that list, is manager as coach.
Yeah.
And I think that's a massive expectation now of people coming into the workplace. So, personalized discussions around career development, personalized discussions around performance and performance management are becoming, more and more expected from people across all the generations, really. But absolutely, people coming into the workplace are expecting that more than I've ever seen. So I would add that in. I think absolutely. Managers need to, in terms of inclusion, they need to live and understand and talk about their own, their own weaknesses, their own biases they might have, and be more open about listening to different points of view and involving people and different people in projects and things that they're working on.
Yeah, so, and I think it's the empathy leadership, isn't it? That's the kind of tone that everyone's expecting now. I think the old school operational manager or leader feels like it's kind of on the way out, or is already on the way out, really. You're not there just to hand tasks out. You've got to kind of coach someone, like you said.
Yeah, and I think
be there for them as well if they need it.
Yeah, and I think that old belief that people don't really want to work and they need to somehow be coerced into working, and that's done by performance management, and that's sort of a stick, is that idea is on its way out, or is out the door in lots of cases. And actually people when they're thought of as the whole human, like empathy, and they say allowed to be authentic at work, and their well-being is managed, and flexible approach to working, actually people do enjoy work and they will be more productive, and
you get more out of them.
Yeah,
and maybe you as a leader might enjoy it as well. If you can be your true self.
Yeah, absolutely.
You enjoy your own job. I think it's often overlooked. I think there's often the focus on your team and so on, but also the individual as a leader as well.
Yeah, I think that authenticity and empathy are two sort of. I mean, they're not buzzwords, but they're really important, and they're now being talked about in leadership, and that human-centered leadership for a long while. So, yeah.
And are they things that you're embedding in your? I know you're developing a program at the minute, Smartest Energy, aren't you? A new leadership program. I'm guessing they're kind of central tenets to what's in there, I guess, as well.
Yeah, we actually have a DE&I manager who we're working with within the organisation to make sure that we include all of those aspects. But yeah, we're using external benchmarking about the future of work. So we're using Gartner and Gallup to look at what they say are the required competencies of leaders right now and in the future. So we've got that solid background. Then we're building a framework based on our own company values and how our leaders and people across the organization at all levels can live them. If you don't have that kind of leadership and that kind of language, then you're going to potentially have a retention problem and an attraction problem to bring people into the business. So
I think something that's really keen to pick your brains on, if it's okay, is it always the kind of age-old debate on inclusive leadership, empathy. I think everyone agrees leadership's changing for the better. And how do you balance those with performance? So I think there's always people push back to say you need to be supportive and helpful, but you've also got performance as well. How does you get that balance right as a business in terms of being there for people, but there is, performance or goals or outcomes needed, in a work kind of context?
Yep. Sorry, leaders, it's you again.
Yeah.
So that more personalized approach and the discussions we were talking about earlier, performance development, coaching conversations are key to this. Having that close relationship with the people that are within your team are really important. So
So I guess if you build the trust with them anyway, it becomes a bit of a moot point potentially, because you should have laid out the expectations anyway.
Yeah.
And you feel comfortable enough to share if they're not being met and have those conversations. So
yeah,
there's no nasty surprises kind of lurking or whatever.
Absolutely. And part of that is, building a culture where you are open and you have, we can be candid with each other and talk openly about performance across, personally and across the business. Also, people want, and I think people are coming into workplaces, wanting a connection to the company and wanting more of a connection than ever before. So we now more than ever have people asking about what are our company values at interview stage.
I was asking about that. I think that's a generational thing as well, isn't it? A lot of people now, they want a bigger purpose than just a job.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing much more of that. And actually, so our recruitment team and our talent team have been working on developing, interview questions that are also based on our values. With the fact of, if we can get people who are more aligned, they're more likely to stay, they're going to be happier and feel more fulfilled at work. And so that's you're starting to see this need for connection coming in at all levels, really.
And it's kind of seeping through right through to the recruitment process.
Yeah.
right through the whole way.
Absolutely. I mean, we see when we talk about trying to move all the levers that are going to help us to attract and retain and develop people, we're talking from attraction all the way through to exit.
Yeah.
So even when we do our exit interviews, we are asking people, did we live the values? Did your leader live the values? It's the whole colleague journey.
For us. The full talent cycle that's kind of covered. Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, I think one area to kind of cover is we talk about building connection and leaders building connection with their team and their peers. How have you experienced pushback from different generations, and maybe their answer is just send them on a course, or I've not got time for this? What would your kind of advice be on slowly changing those attitudes, maybe, or advice you've given them, or a methodology that's worked really well?
Yeah, we have seen this, and I think you're always going to get some level of pushback, or maybe a distrust, or just don't believe that that's the right way, or people who've become very successful in their business or in their lives doing it a completely different way.
Yeah.
But the fact is that things are changing, and culturally we have got different expectations now, and what I tend to rely on then is a bit of persistence and tenacity, and actually relying a bit on data. So over time you can expose people who might not agree at first to the data, and show them that a different leadership style can be applied and can make a difference to the results of the business, satisfaction and motivation and retention of their teams, even to the most old school of manager, are really important.
Give a bigger picture.
Speed to competence is really important. So if you can actually start to show them that they can get some of those things by leading in a slightly different way, or at least getting their leaders to lead in a slightly different way, it's going to start showing them results. Then hopefully you can start over time to change their opinions.
Brilliant. I think as always, Stephen, your expertise has been really valuable. We always end the show or the episode with our live and learn. I guess on generational leadership and why it matters, have you got any like a top tip for people that you would leave us with in terms of why it matters and how to crack generational leadership?
I don't know if you can crack it. It's really,
That's probably the question.
It's just a really interesting subject. I'd advise everyone to just keep looking at it and reading about it. But I'm going to say something a little bit, well, not controversial, but I think there's not as much in it as you think. Like I think even a boomer, when they were coming into the workforce, maybe they had some of those beliefs that we're saying about Gen Y now, and then they just mature over time and have a different view later on. So I think we've got to be aware that actually people coming into the workforce might also evolve their thinking, and I think you just need to be close to the business and really try and understand it as best you can. But this personalized approach is really needed. That's why managers need to be a bit more flexible in their approach, because they could have two boomers who learn and work in completely different ways. Absolutely. And two Gen Z who learn and work in completely different ways. So sometimes I find it difficult to sort of try and put them all into sort of stereotypes.
And it's not, sometimes the labels aren't helpful either.
They're not helpful all
We've
the
got
time.
a video on it about just because you're a certain generation doesn't mean you've got these certain assumptions.
Exactly. And I still feel 18.
You still look 18, Stephen, don't worry. No, but thanks for coming on again, and really appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure as always.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.